Monica Dottoy. Welcome to History Lessons. Today I am going to talk on the topic the French Revolution. The French Revolution is regarded as one of the greatest landmarks of European history. It has started in 1789 and it lasted till 1799. So it began with an attempt to create constitutional monarchy, but soon became a movement aiming at overthrowing the Austrian regime and also removing the rigid social structure of the French society of the Austrian regime. So there were many ideals that had started during French Revolution, like liberty, equality, fraternity. So there were many causes that had led to the French Revolution. There were social causes, economic causes, political causes, etc. So now we will I will talk about the social causes. So the social causes, the French society consisted of three estates. The first estate consisted of the clergymen. The second estate consisted of nobility that was placed just below the clergy, and the third estate that had the maximum population in the French society. They were the commoners, the common people. They were mainly merchants, businessmen, peasants, landless laborers, etc. So the first two estates, that was the first estate and the second estate, the clergy and the nobles, they consisted of 10% of population in the society, while on the other hand the third estate, like the common people, consisted 90% of the population in the society. The first two estates, they enjoyed a lot of privileges. They were fewer in number, but the amount of privileges they enjoyed was nothing compared to the third estate. They owned landed property. About 60% of the land belonged to the nobility, church, and the richer members of the third estate. In addition, the nobility and the clergy were exempted from the payment of taxes. The third estate had to face a number of discrimination and oppression. They had to bear burden of taxation levied by the king and the two estates. The peasants were forced to work for free for their lords. The workers were not allowed to leave their jobs without the consent of the employers. The professionals did not have any position in the society. Now we will come to the political causes. The Bourbon dynasty had ruled over the last 15th century since then, and the kings of the dynasty were absolute monarchs who believed in the divine right authority or divine right theory. They thought that they were answerable to God for every actions they did. Consulting common people therefore was not required at all. This caused discontent among the commoners. At the time of French Revolution, people were fed up with the autocratic rule of Louis XVI, who was a weak ruler. Under him, the administration had become corrupt and inefficient. The king also used his power for his own selfish ends and did not do much for the welfare of the people. Now there were economic causes. What were the economic causes? The French government was heavily under debt, but the king used to spend a lot of money behind his luxury, and he used to take all the money from the state treasury. Now, to add to the burden, Louis XVI got himself involved in the American War of Independence and brought the country to the brink of bankruptcy. The policy of exempting the rich from taxation never allowed the state treasury to be filled. Now, what were the roles of the philosophers during that time? So there were many intellectual philosophers who actually rose during the French Revolution and whose ideas actually inspired many common people. So the intellectual base for the revolution was provided by philosophers like Voltaire, Montesquieu, Rousseau, Locke, etc. People were greatly stimulated by their writings, their thinking, and their ideologies. People were also inspired by the revolutionary ideas like liberty, equality, fraternity, popular sovereignty. Now, American War of Independence. The French people were also inspired by the American War of Independence. Many French soldiers and generals participated in the war. they came back and inspired people to fight against the despotic and unjust government. So, the course of revolution. In May 1789, Louis XVI was in huge need for money and compelled him to convene a meeting of the Estates General. All the three estates, that was the first estate which consisted of the clergy, the second estate that consisted of the nobility, and the third estate that consisted of mainly the commoners, they actually represented the meeting. The third estate demanded equality in taxation and abolition of privileges upon denial of their proposal. The third estate walked out in protest. On June 17, 1789, the representatives of the Third Estate formed a National Assembly. They assembled in the Royal Indoor Tennis Court at Versailles and took the oath that they would not disband or return home until a new constitution was obtained or drafted. This pledge is considered as the Tennis Court Pledge. The new constitution was aimed at limiting the movement of troops in Paris. This action led to the mob in Paris to openly revolt against the king. On July 14, 1789, they stormed into the prison of Bastille. They believed that the fortress was a sign of despotism and house ammunition. The mob released the prisoners in the fortress and seized ammunition. This was the beginning of revolution. Till today, France celebrates this day as Bastille Day. At the end of August, the National Assembly formed the Declaration of Rights of Man and Citizen as a prologue to the Constitution. It listed the basic rights such as the right to life, freedom of speech, equality before law, and right to property. The draft of the constitution was completed by 1791. In 1793, the king and the queen were tried and executed. The monarchy in France was abolished and country was declared a democratic republic. Now, what was the significance of the French Revolution? The French Revolution had a profound impact not only on the subsequent history of France but also that of the world. In France, it brought an end to the absolute monarchy and the system of feudalism. The principles of republican took deep roots in France. It popularized the principles of freedom, equality, and fraternity, which continue to inspire the functioning of government in various parts of the world. And lastly, the principle of sovereignty enshrined in it became the basis of all modern governments. So this is how the French Revolution had led an impact in the entire society. Still, French Revolution is regarded as one of the important examples in history, one of the greatest events in history, and from French Revolution we take many ideas. Our government also took many ideas like liberty, equality, and fraternity, which is added in our Indian constitution. So this is how French Revolution has brought a change in the entire world. Thank you.